under which Newton is said to have seen the apple fall. Some people say it fell in front of him, some people say it fell on him. Now, wherever it fell, imagine if instead of Newton, a monkey had been sitting there. The apple had fallen. What would the monkey have done?
Eat it.
Just picked it, eaten it, and gone on its way. So, Newton could also have done that. But instead, he looked for meaning. What made this apple fall? What made this apple fall? And through that, he came up with the theory of gravity. And that was actually started the engine of the scientific growth that has transformed the world around us. So we all try to make sense of things. And often it is the way we make sense of things that enables us to respond properly or improperly. So we all place things in different explanatory contexts. Say for example, now if I am speaking and suddenly the voice stops going, I wonder what happened. Or did I just by accident press this and it got switched off? That's one explanation. See, the event is that the voice is not getting transmitted. Then when we see an event, we try to make sense of it. That means we try to link that event with some cause. And these two comprise a causal box. So one could be, did I accidentally press this and it got turned off? Other could be maybe there's a sound system somewhere and somebody leaned on it. That's why it got switched off. It's another causal box. A third could be that maybe this mic has turned defective. So depending on which causal box we put in, if the mic is defective, then we look for a replacement. If, say no, actually the power supply has gone off here, then do we have a generator? We could escalate this to various levels. Maybe Australia has been attacked by terrorists and the whole power plants have been blown up. Now, imagine if say this, the mic goes off and someone says, oh, Australia has been attacked by terrorists. What's wrong with you? Isn't it? Now that is also a possible explanation, but that's not a probable explanation. So, if somebody escalates explanations to that level directly, then we say, something is wrong here. So what happens when we face misery? Our mind manufactures some meaning. And what meaning it manufactures determines how we will respond. So I was participating in a conference on spirituality and mental health in America, in Connecticut, and there are different people who were presenting both mental health caregivers and the care receivers. There's one girl, she told her story of how she sank into depression. And then of course by spirituality she was able to come out, but how she sank, it was very revealing. He said she was studying in a university and by the side to get some money she used to wait tables in a nearby hotel. So one day she was taking a glass of water for a client and the glass slipped from her hand. It spilled and created a big mess. And she thought, if I can't carry one glass of water, what am I ever going to do in my life? And that event triggered a depression in her. Now, how many of us have had glasses of water slipping from our hands? All of us sometime or the other. But then what happened? Now, she could have put it in many different contexts. Okay, maybe was my hand slippery? Or maybe did somebody just call me attention and I got distracted, that's why this slipped off? Or was the floor slippery and I lost my balance? There could be many different causal boxes. But here, generally when there is mental health issues, what happens is, we place events in destructive causal boxes. The smallest events, we start giving the biggest meanings. We say we come to some place and we greet someone. and that person just doesn't respond. And immediately our mind may start saying, nobody loves me, nobody cares for me, people are mean, or maybe, I am unlovable. Now, from one person not responding to our greeting, it's a huge escalation. So when we don't have a proper, some function of coherent view of reality, then what happens? Our mind can play havoc with us by placing even an ordinary event in a catastrophic causal context. So that's why when misery comes upon us, depending on what kind of meaning the mind gives to it, our response is shaped. So what spiritual wisdom texts like the Bhagavad Gita offer us is a framework by which we can see the events in our life constructively, so that we can come up with the most constructive responses. Now, I'm not using the word correct responses, because what is right or wrong in life is very difficult to understand. But what response is constructive? Right and wrong also brings the issue of morality, and it can make us judgmental. What response is constructive and what response is destructive? So now, say in the routine course of our life, we all have certain things to do. We may have our jobs, we may have families, we may have our hobbies, and we go along in the routine course of our life. And whatever is happening for us, we just see it from that perspective, what is happening around us. But sometimes, it's suddenly, the normal course of our life becomes blocked by something. It might be that we have a job, but suddenly we lose the job, fired. We're in a relationship and suddenly the other person breaks up with us, something like that. We're young and healthy and suddenly we find that we've got some terrible disease. So at that time, the question comes up, what am I meant to do? What am I meant to do? In the world today, this brings me now to the other part. I said I'll talk about three M's and 4 C's. So we all have certain things that we live for. Now broadly in today's world, we all think at a basic level that pleasure is what we all want. Happiness, we all want pleasure. And the world teaches us, broadly speaking, that pleasure comes by 2 things: collecting and consuming. We want as many things as we can possess. The person who has the most toys, they're the most successful. And then consuming. Eat things, watch things, touch things, and we can consume. So now collecting and consuming, these do give us some pleasure. No doubt about it. At the same time, is this pleasure sufficient? Sufficient, of course, we can say we always want more pleasure. But when we are going to face life, at that time, pleasure is too fragile a purpose to sustain us through life's struggles. Pleasure is too fragile, it's too weak, too insubstantial a purpose. Suppose somebody believes that their life's purpose is to look good and attract as many people as possible to themselves. And somehow something happens, maybe they made an accident or something, and then their looks start deteriorating. Or somebody's purpose is to earn as much money as possible. I saw an ad in India, it says, buy this car and enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. So, somebody thinks earning money and getting these things is what is the purpose of my life? That's what I'm living for. And I'm enjoying that. Now, we may enjoy it when people are, look at us with awed eyes. But if that is that is the purpose. If pleasure is our purpose, pleasure through, say, collecting and consuming, it's too fragile. It can be taken away at any time. And not only is it too fragile, actually pleasure is too cheap a purpose to make our life meaningful. What do I mean by too cheap? How many of you like humor? Anyone? If anyone says I don't like humor, we wonder what's going on. So now, one way of say source of humor, one source of humor is say comedy shows. Suppose somebody tells you from tomorrow onward, you have no financial obligations, no professional obligations, no family obligations. Just sit in front of the TV and for the rest of your life watch comedy shows. How many of us would want to do that? No, maybe for half an hour, maybe a few hours. But after that, we want to do something. We want to have something to do, something to bite our teeth, put our teeth into, get some challenge to deal with. So, pleasure is, although we want pleasure is too cheap a purpose. At an even more gross level, we could say that, say if you have a small child in your family or in the neighborhood, and you just want to have some fun with that child, you can start tickling the belly of the child. Now when you tickle the belly, what happens? The child laughs. Now, if the child starts laughing, now, is that laughter happiness?
Reaction.
It's a reaction. We could call it happiness of some kind, but it's not really happiness. If it were happiness, and we all want happiness, then we all could manufacture our own perpetual tickling machine. And tickle ourselves for the rest of our lives and be happy. So these pleasures are not, they don't really count as pleasures. As I said, pleasure is too cheap and too fragile for making our life meaningful or for helping us to sustain us through life's troubles. So the Gita talks about this in poetic terms. It says that there are pleasures in the world which taste like nectar in the beginning, but they turn into poison at the end. So it's, suppose somebody gives you a delicious drink. It's like, maybe it's some delicious drink, you take it, and the first layer is sweet, and after that it's like poison. It's like, what happened? But then that person stops it, you have to drink it. And no, I don't want to drink it. But that's what happens, unfortunately, with us in life. So, the world around us today tells us that consuming, that collecting and consuming, that defines a successful person. And that defines a happy person. And there are hundreds of ads telling us, buy this, get this, do this, and you'll be happy. And yes, there is some pleasure, but it is superficial pleasure. It is a very surface level pleasure. So the way I'm linking this, first I talk about the 3 M's. Amid misery, our mind constructs a meaning. Now, if the meaning we are constructing is based on collecting and consuming, then that is not a very sound basis. When we are unable to collect, we are unable to consume, we feel, why? What's wrong? Then that can lead us, that can very easily bring out the worst within us. If I want to collect and enjoy something, and I don't get it, and somebody else gets it, why do they get it? And it can lead us to start hating ourselves. Now, what is wrong with me? Why don't I ever succeed in my life? Or it can make us hate others. No, why should they, when I'm getting it so bad, why should they get it so good? Or worse, it can make us hate the world itself. I am useless, people are manipulative, or the world is rotten. All these three responses, when they come upon us, they start bringing out the worst within us. When we start hating people, then we start becoming more disagreeable, we start pulling people down, and we start increasing the misery in the world. Of course, if we hate ourselves, then that's definitely making ourselves miserable. And if we hate the world itself, we start thinking the world itself is a rotten place. That is like spitting at the sky. What happens? It just comes back on us, isn't it? So, if our worldview is driven by these ideas that, yeah, I want pleasure, and pleasure is from collecting and consuming, then sooner or later, the inability to collect and consume sufficiently will start bringing out the worst in us. And thus, whatever life's misery is, our mind will multiply it. So, I was in MIT in America, and when I was giving a talk over there, and one student told me about his friend. This was a brilliant student from India. He came there and he was studying. And while he was studying, at that time, there was one exam in which he expected to do well, but he didn't do that well. And especially, say, students from Asian countries, India and China, I grew up also in the same culture. For students, our whole identity is on our grades, our marks. And if you don't get that, as we grow older, say probably as we start earning money, then our self-worth becomes equated with our net worth. But so at that time, he had that idea, I have to get these marks, I have to get this grade. And when he didn't get it, he just got so shaken, he wanted some escape. And somehow he started mixing with people, with some in many universities, especially in America now, the opioid crisis is a national emergency. So he got mixed with some people who started giving him some opioids. And he just got a little poor grade in one exam, but because of the opioid, by the next semester his whole grade is flung and his parents actually had to take him back to India to treat him. So what happened was that life brought its own misery, but his response made it worse. And that response, in some ways, was that because his whole meaning was, my life is meant to get these grades. If I don't get, what do I do? So we need a bigger vision for life. What is life made for? Of course, we want happiness. But happiness is best experienced as a byproduct of something meaningful, not as a product that we pursue. If you look at the most deeply happy moments in our life, they are not when we specifically went out to be happy. We might go for maybe trekking on a mountain or skiing or wherever we might go. But at those times, maybe we were with some friends and there were some bonding moments. We had some special experiences. So happiness is a byproduct of doing something meaningful. So if we have some creative talents and then we work very hard. I'm a writer, I have written several books. So there's a writer who says that writing is extremely easy. All that you have to do is sit in front of a computer and glare at it till drops of blood form on your forehead. So now, although I love writing, it's not that I always love writing. But after I go through the process of when I don't get the right word, sometimes I get the word, but then I realize they're not right. But then after going through that, when I have written something meaningful, then there's fulfillment. So we could say there is pleasure at different levels. There is superficial pleasure by just maybe eating something or watching something, some entertainment. But there's a deeper pleasure which is a byproduct of something meaningful. When you try to say, write some, or you're doing some music, you try to play the music as well as you can. You slowly start entering into it. Then, as a byproduct, we get satisfaction. So, the Gita, to put the message of the Gita in contemporary terms, and there are these two C's which are not a worthwhile purpose for our life, is collecting and consuming. But two C's, the concluding part of the talk now, the two C's that can bring meaning to our life is the connecting and contributing. Connection and contribution. And the Gita explains that our essential identity goes beyond our body. It goes beyond our minds. It is spiritual. And we all want to, what we most deeply need is connection. If we look at the moments of our life that we most cherish, usually they will fall somewhere in between these two categories. When we had some deep, meaningful interaction with someone. We might have laughed and enjoyed, but we also shared our hearts. There's connection. Or there is contribution. When we felt that our existence made a difference for someone. So that is the time when we feel sublimely enlivened. So connection and contribution are what bring deep meaning to our lives. And when there is deep meaning, then pain becomes bearable. Life's misery is unavoidable. And like earlier I said, pleasure is too cheap and fragile a purpose. We don't just want pleasure. We want meaningful pleasure. Meaningful pleasure is pleasure that comes from either a connection or a contribution. And conversely, if we have a meaningful purpose centered on connection and contribution, then even pain becomes bearable. We're not really against pain per se. Of course, nobody wants pain. But what we really don't want is meaningless pain. We're walking along a road and suddenly, say, a thorn or a nail goes into our foot. We'll just be irritated. Why? But afterward we might go to a clinic to get a tetanus shot. And when we're getting that tetanus shot, again something is going into our foot. But we don't resent that. In fact, we pay the person who puts that person. Why? Because we see that pain as meaningful, that it's serving some purpose. So, actually, we can't avoid, I began by saying that life is tough. We can't escape or remove the distresses of life, the misery of life. But if we can have a meaning big enough that will make the miseries bearable. And that is the explanatory framework that the Gita provides. The Gita says that we are all spiritual beings. We are souls. And the soul is on a journey of spiritual evolution. Spiritual evolution. So when we talk about evolve, a living being evolves means it becomes better and better. So spiritual evolution means that our conception of life expands. So our capacity to learn and our capacity to love, it grows. So when we live in the world, we basically take in information from the world and we act in the world. So taking information from the world is learning. And acting in the world, we can act in a mood of love. So we are meant to evolve. And this spiritual evolution means that spiritual evolution essentially means that we are all finite beings. We are all conscious, finite beings, we are souls, and there is an infinite being. There is an ultimate reality. And there is a bond of love between the finite and the infinite. In fact, yoga itself means connection. It is a connection between the finite and the infinite. The kirtan that we did, the kirtan is a way of using music and sound to establish this connection between the finite and the infinite. So, as souls, we are meant for lasting love in our relationship with the infinite. We are meant for lasting life because the soul is indestructible. And going back to the point of connection and contribution, what the Gita tells us is that our spiritual evolution means that we connect with the divine internally. Of course, we connect with people around us, and we can have some connections which are very close, some connections which are not that close. The only enduring connection is the connection of the finite soul with the infinite soul. So that inner connection, when we develop through bhakti, through devotion, and then there is internal connection and then there is external contribution. Now each one of us, we can make a difference in the world. In fact, right now if we think of our own lives, we can probably think of the 2-3 things which we are doing. If we stop doing them, we could do much better in whatever walk of life we are doing. Or there are 2-3 things which we start doing, we can make a better contribution. Maybe as professionals, as family members, as just human beings in a fragile biosphere. So now, this connection and contribution, they have a symbiotic relationship. But both nourish each other. The more we become connected with the divine within us, with the infinite consciousness within us, then by that we gain stability. We understand that our life has ultimate meaning. That things may happen, but the universe moves purposefully. Bad things may happen, but good can emerge from the bad. When the universe moves, when we get that understand the universe moves purposefully, then we get a greater inspiration to act constructively. So that connection with the divine within us, it stabilizes us. More importantly, it also purifies us. We all have forces within us, impurities within us, which impel us to unhealthy responses. I'd say we have greed within us, we have anger within us. So all of these sometimes make things worse for us. When we give in to them, our actions make things worse. But if we develop that inner connection with the divine, then these impurities get cleansed from within us. Because the divine is like the supreme light, and these impurities are like darkness. They get dissipated when the light is awakened within us. And that light of the divine not only shines in our heart, but shines through our heart into the outer world to make our life brighter and make our world brighter. We all, if we pull our acts together, if we learn to connect internally and strengthen ourselves, purify ourselves, thereby we pull our act together, we all can make a better contribution, a bigger contribution. We can make a bigger difference in, even if we can make a positive difference in one person's life, that itself is significant. That can make our own suffering, our own life's toughness, its misery bearable. But we can make much more difference also. When the light of the divine shines through us, how much of a difference can we make by that grace? That discovering that can become our life's biggest adventure. Adventure in life is not just we jumping out from a parachute from a plane. Can we make? And we all can make a bigger difference. So that when we are able to make a better contribution, that gives us greater inspiration. This connection works. This connection helps me. And that inspires us to become more connected. And the more connected we become, the more contribution we make. The more contribution we make, the more we become inspired to be connected. And in that way, our life can gain more and more meaning. The Gita says that eventually we can become so deeply connected that at even the greatest of distresses in life will not devastate us. Life may send its misery, but we will be able to expand our consciousness beyond it. When we make our life meaningful, then even if pain comes in our life, we may have to live with pain, but we won't have to live in pain. The meaning that we have for our life through connection and contribution will make our vision of life, make our consciousness so big that okay, that pain is there, it's a part of my life. And that's how we can all make our own life meaningful and joyful. So I'll summarize. I spoke today on the topic of how can we live meaningfully. And I started by talking about how the world we live in is changing so fast, with practically so many upheavals happening, philosophically so many ideas different people having, that what stable foundation can we have for our life? How can we construct a worldview with a stable foundation? So that what one truth we can all agree upon? You remember? Yeah, life is tough. So I talked about 3 M's initially. Then you remember, first M was? Misery. Yeah. So misery is just a fact of life. Then, what is second M? Mind. So depending on how our mind processes that misery, we can either make it aggravate that misery or minimize that misery. Life determines our problems, but our mind determines their size. And the way our mind responds to it is determined by the third meaning. What meaning do we assign to it? If a glass of water slips from my hand and the meaning I assign to it is I'm worthless, then that will cause far greater misery in my life. Then I think, okay, maybe my hand was slippery, that's why the glass slipped. So now humanity has progressed because of its capacity to find meaning. Newton saw the fruit falling and he conceived the theory of gravity. He discovered the principles of gravity. So we need to construct meaning so that we can place the events that happen in our life in the most constructive context. Not necessarily correct or wrong, but just most constructive. So we talk about this framework so that when misery will come in our life, how can we place that misery in a constructive context? Then I talked about what is the
causative boxes.
Yeah, causal boxes. We all can place things in different causal boxes. Thank you. So then, what is the causal box that our contemporary culture uses? Yeah, it's basically life is meant for enjoyment, and enjoyment comes through collecting and consuming. Now, these do give us some pleasure, but it's superficial pleasure. When we pursue pleasure through collecting and consuming, there are 2 problems with it. First, the pleasure is too cheap. It's a cheaper purpose. We won't want to watch comedy shows for the rest of our life. And pleasure is too fragile. Suppose our capacity to collect or consume is stripped away from us. Then what do? We'll have nothing to live for. Right? So then we discussed about what does the Gita say? How can we get meaning in our life? By collection, by connection and contribution. So even in our day-to-day life, we see that when we can connect meaningfully with some other human being, and that's when we feel a deep sense of joy. Or when by our actions we can do something that can help someone, that can make a difference, that's the contribution. So we can and we should have connection and contribution at the level of reality that we are functioning at. But sometimes our functional view of life is shattered. Something suddenly goes wrong, and then we may just start hating ourselves, or we start hating others, or we start hating the world itself. And all of these will trigger destructive responses within us. So to avoid destructive responses, we need a expansive enough vision of the world, vision of reality. And that vision is that we are beyond our bodies, beyond our minds, we are souls, we are spiritual beings on a journey of evolution, spiritual evolution. If spiritual evolution means we expand our capacity to learn, that means learn here means that find how to create meaning, how to place things in a meaningful framework, and then to love. How can we act not resentfully but lovingly? And that spiritual evolution means that we are finite consciousness and there is an infinite consciousness. It's the divine, and the connection, our connection with the divine, will stabilize and purify us. Stabilize is among all of life's uncertainties. Yes, this is certain, this is stable. That the universe might seem to be, things might seem to be happening chaotically, but ultimately the universe moves purposefully. That stabilizes us. And the impurities such as anger or greed or envy that bring out the worst within us, they become cleansed. They are like darkness, and the light of the divine, it streams to our heart, it cleanses us of those. And when that happens, then that connection can enhance our contribution. So if our responses are not impulsive or destructive, we all can make a much greater difference. And seeing that, we feel inspired to strengthen our connection. As connection and contribution both grow symbiotically, then gradually our sense of meaning and fulfillment in our life becomes so great that even if the misery comes upon us, we may have to live with pain, but we won't have to live in pain. By pulling our act together, we all can make a significant difference. And how much of a difference? Discovering that can make our life a living adventure. Thank you very much.